Warning, the $2 trillion trailer park trap killing your home dreams. The paper felt thin in her hands, same notice on every door. Effective next month, 40% increase. 30 days to comply. She stood on her porch counting pills against dollars and weeks, whispering numbers that didn't add up. The home behind her couldn't go anywhere. Moving it would cost more than she had in the bank. Pay, or risk losing everything she built inside those walls. Across the park, families did their own math. Then someone asked the question that would split this place in two. Who planned a business on homes that can't move? And why did it land here now? Origins, how mobile homes got anchored. To see why the trap works, we need to go back to when it looked like freedom on wheels. In the 1950s, the highway was a promise. Trailers rolled behind Chevys and Fords, parking in tidy rows called courts. Affordability was the hook, but mobility was the romance. Go where the work is, take your home with you. Small operators mowed the grass, fixed a pipe, waved at kids on bikes. Rent was a handshake and a coffee chat away. The parks grew on the edges of towns, close enough to clock in, far enough to stay unnoticed. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Trailers got heavier. Families settled. By the early 1970s, the government stepped in with a new national building code for manufactured housing. HUD tags went on new homes, standards went up, and the units stopped pretending they were campers. Skirting hid the wheels. Tie-downs and concrete pads kept storms from tearing lives out of the ground. The houses improved, and the anchor set. This is the split ownership model that would define everything that followed. Families own the structure, someone else owns the dirt. The romance of motion faded to a practical truth. You can change a couch. You can repaint the siding. But your foundation is a lease, and the signature on that lease isn't yours. Zoning politics did the rest. City councils didn't say get out. They said not here. Parks were pushed to fringes, tucked behind industrial corridors or along county roads. The land use is locked in. New parks were hard to approve and harder to finance. Over decades, that quiet discrimination baked in a scarcity that would become priceless to anyone holding the deeds. Ask the early owners what it felt like. Many were mom-and-pop landlords who lived nearby and ran the place like an extended block. They charged low rents because turnover hurt. They forgave a late fee because they saw the bruise or the layoff notice. Infrastructure sat under private control. Water lines that only they knew, septic systems with quirks, cracked roads that needed summer patches. None of this looked like Wall Street. It looked like a small business with a long memory. But there was one problem hiding inside this comfortable arrangement. The homes weren't actually moving. Towing a decades-old single-wide risked, splitting it along the seams. A double-wide meant disassembly, and a precision dance back together. The physics of mobility gave way to the economics of staying put. Over time, that reality hardened into leverage, even if the first generation of owners rarely used it. Everything was about to change when the numbers guys realized what the lease had become. If you own the ground under a neighborhood that can't pick up and leave, and if replacing that ground is nearly impossible because new parks don't get built, you don't manage tenants, you manage cash flows. What nobody knew at the time, standing over a broken water main or tuning up a lawn tractor, was that the pad beneath each porch could be modeled like a bond. 3 details turned into a thesis. First, inelastic demand. People needed the space to keep their home. The home had no cheaper alternative. Second, low capital expenditures. You weren't renovating kitchens in dozens of units. You were maintaining pipes, roads, and a rule book. Third, forced retention. Move-out costs weren't a truck and a weekend. They were thousands of dollars, permits, and a new vacant pad you might never find. Meanwhile, local politics kept doing their slow, relentless work. When new subdivisions argued about traffic and schools, parks faced something simpler: stigma. Manufactured housing was branded other, tax base light, image heavy. Every meeting that stalled a permit somewhere else tightened the moat around existing communities. The unintended consequence of protecting neighborhoods was to fix the supply of land under these homes almost in place. Inside the homes, people built lives because permanence snuck in. Babies learned to walk on vinyl flooring. Veterans hung service photos. Seniors planted roses by the steps. You could call it a trailer, but the roots were real, and everyone knew it when storms hit or when a neighbor died and casseroles lined the sidewalk. Then the country changed. Wages flattened. Rents in cities climbed. Manufactured homes stayed for millions the last. Rung of ownership within reach. That demand didn't just hold, it grew. Early owners aged. Their kids often didn't want the business. The handshake era met the letter of intent email. Brokers started calling with offers that moved fast and required no repairs. The price wasn't just for land and pipes. It was for captive demand, documentable on a spreadsheet. Here's where the original idea of mobile turned into the quiet hinge. Moving a home was theoretically possible, but practically, it was a trip most couldn't afford. The industry had matured into something stable, almost hidden. The families owned their walls. The landlords owned the dirt. Zoning kept the circle small. And the lease, those few pages renewed year after year, held more power than anyone at those 1950s courts could have imagined. To understand the trap in today's notice, the 40% that blows up a month's budget, we had to see how mobility got anchored by code, by concrete, and by politics. The form didn't just evolve, it calcified. And once it did, the next chapter wrote itself. Someone would monetize the anchor. The perfect PE asset, captive customers, and predictable cash flow. Everything lined up for someone who spoke in basis points. You had homes that couldn't easily leave, land that almost never got replaced, and leases that could do more work than drywall ever could. That's when the pitch decks started circulating. Apollo linked Inspire communities, Blackstone's treehouse communities, Carlyle platforms and family offices you've never heard of. The language was tidy. Low capex, inelastic demand, stable yield. What nobody on the porch saw that day was the slide that made it obvious. Each pad was a coupon that matured every month. Here's the spine of the thesis. First, the mobile myth was baked into pricing power. Moving a manufactured home wasn't a Saturday errand. It averaged about $9,000, and a double-wide could run $15,000 to $20,000 for full-service relocation. That's disassembly, transport, permits, setup, utilities. Every step designed for specialists with invoices to match. You can't click relocate on a website and comparison shop your way out of a rent hike. So, churn stayed low by design, not by chance. Second, the capital plan didn't require granite counters. The operator owned roads, water lines, sewer laterals, common areas, the bones, not the finishes. Dollars went into infrastructure maintenance, compliance, and enforcement rather than unit-by-unit rehabs. On a spreadsheet, that meant predictable operating expenses and fewer surprises per door. If you can hold OPEX steady while raising revenue, the math writes its own ending. Third, zoning turned into a moat you didn't need to landscape. New parks face neighbors, planning boards, and a stigma that slows or stops approvals. Even when a city says yes, lenders and insurers ask hard questions. So supply froze across many regions. That scarcity wasn't an accident. It was policy, layered over decades by people who thought they were preserving neighborhoods. For an acquirer, scarcity became a feature to be monetized. The playbook is simple enough to fit on an index card. Acquire from a retiring owner at a cap rate that reflects undermarket rents. Within 60 to 120 days, align to market, which means step the pad rent 20 to 70%, depending on what the region will bear and the comps your broker can wave around. Add billbacks, sub-meter water, pass through sewer and trash. Enforce rules that were once soft, yard standards, vehicle limits, no subletting. The tone shifts from neighbor to operator, and the balance sheet tightens its grip. Meanwhile, the financing is its part. If property value is a function of net operating income, every extra dollar of rent expands the appraised value by a multiple. Raise the NOI, refinance at better terms, pull out cash, repeat. Bridge loans and interest-only periods give time for the rent reset to season. Covenants push growth targets. In a 3 to 7 year window, you've either sold at a higher price or refinanced again to roll the equity into the next portfolio. Raise, refi, repeat isn't a slogan. It's the treadmill that keeps the debt engine humming. The sales pitch to investors leans into weatherproof metaphors. Recession-resistant. Fragmented space ripe for consolidation. Stable mid-single-digit yield with inflation hedge. The decks nod to fragmentation. Tens of thousands of parks, many still mom and pop, then promise discipline. Standardized leases, central billing, regional managers, fee schedules. Blackstone's large-scale buying after 2018 signaled that the category wasn't fringe anymore. It was institutional. What nobody in those rooms had to say out loud was the human mechanism that made the underwriting work. If a family can't shoulder a $9,000 move, they will prioritize pad rent over almost everything else. They'll juggle prescriptions, overtime, food choices, and school supplies before they risk default. That's not cruelty in a memo. It's a probability in a cell that ripples through a waterfall model. When a resident does fall behind, the paperwork has levers, late fees, notices, and in too many leases, an abandonment clause that lets the park take control of the home after eviction or default. The asset doesn't just hold a line on rent. It can capture the structure itself and cycle it back into the sales funnel. There are moments in every deal where the operators bet on silence. They assume residents won't organize in 90 days. They bank on city attorneys lacking bandwidth to enforce weak statutes. They count on the invisibility of parks to the press unless something catches fire. And most of the time, they're right. That invisibility is part of the attraction. You can harvest yield from behind a hedge. From the other side, a few people did see the machine assembling. Smaller syndicators copied the majors, promising investors a chance to ride along. Family offices liked the downside protection story. Pension funds, investing through private equity vehicles, were told their retirees' money would find steady shelter in workforce housing. The irony didn't slow the capital. It amplified it. Back on the porch, none of this helped with the math. But this is how a notice becomes an instrument. The anchor under the home, the scarcity beyond the fence, the clause in the lease, the refinance waiting on the other side. It's one system. And to the funds that assembled it, each family's decision to pay this month isn't personal. It's predictable. The Rollup wave, from mom and pop to mega fund. While that financing treadmill spun in boardrooms, a quieter machine started up on kitchen tables. Brokers built lists the old-fashioned way, county records, tax rolls, rumor networks about who is nearing retirement. Then the mailers landed. We buy communities. Fast close. No repairs. Keep your legacy. Cold calls followed with numbers ready and a promise to spare owners the headache of spring potholes and winter burst lines. For operators who'd carried wrenches for decades, the pitch had gravity. Take chips off the table, avoid capital gains with a 1031 exchange, hand the headaches to professionals. 3 days earlier, someone had slipped a letter under an office door in a park like this one. It offered a cap rate that assumed undermarket rents, and a due diligence period so short it felt like a dare. The buyer would pay cash, or so the broker said, and close before the next rent cycle. The seller's son, who lived in another state and didn't want the business, sent back a yes before lunch. That's how many of these stories start, not with schemes, but with fatigue and timing. Unknown to them, across town, a different park got almost the same letter from a different platform. The names changed. Some were REITs with investor calls, some were private funds with quiet LPs, but the playbook was aligned. After 2018, Blackstone's surge into manufactured housing sent a signal that others heard. Carlyle-affiliated groups, Apollo-linked Inspire communities, regional syndicators flying under radar, all fed a broker pipeline that standardized outreach. Offers weren't handwritten. They were templated, pre-approved, and stacked with terms the mom and pops rarely saw from local buyers. This was the moment everything changed, one former owner told us. The buyer didn't just purchase a property, they rolled it into a portfolio. Suddenly, leases that had lived in file drawers for years were swapped for thick packets drafted by central counsel. Rules matched across states. Late fees snapped to a schedule. Professional management arrived with computer systems and regional supervisors who'd never set foot on these streets till acquisition day. Portfolio bundling made everything downstream cheaper. Debt got priced on the aggregate, not the one-off risk of a park with a finicky well. Insurance brokers negotiated master policies. Vendors signed multi-park contracts. The savings didn't show up as lower rents. They showed up as headroom for the NOI to expand when those standardized rents hit. And every extra dollar in one park amplified the refinance math across the stack. National comps did their next trick. A manager could point to market rate, numbers pulled from cities an hour away, or from nearby parks already reset by the same operator. Local context, older residents, fixed incomes, the lack of vacant pads for 50 miles, fell out of the spreadsheet. The story became consistency. Bring these sites into alignment. If that created a shock, the documentation justified it. This is what the market bears. The market, of course, was partly defined by the same firms citing it. Meanwhile, small owners trying to hold the line faced a new kind of arms race. Tenants would show them notices from the next park over, and ask if a sale was coming here, too. Banks started to look at exit plans when renewing loans. Was the property institutional ready? Title companies learned the rhythm of 1031 timelines and expedited closings. What used to take months could wrap in weeks. You didn't just sell to a neighbor, you sold into a machine. Regional monopolies grew quietly. An operator might control 4 parks within commuting distance, each with its own branding but one back office. If you got pushed out of one, your application to the next met the same screening window and the same rent sheet. If your home was older, some parks wouldn't take it at all. Residents felt the invisible fence even when the highway ran wide open beside them. Here's where it gets personal. A park manager who'd known birthdays and grandkids retired the day after the sale. The new team landed with clipboards and a calendar. They weren't cruel, they were trained. They had quotas, lease-up targets, timelines for rule compliance. When a tenant asked for a grace period because the pension check hit on the 5th, the answer shifted from, "I'll work with you," to "That's not our policy." That single line flips safety into risk, and you can measure it in evictions over time. What nobody knew at the time was how quickly culture could flip. The Rollup didn't just streamline operations. It scrubbed away the informal safety net that had made parks livable under stress. In its place, a standardized engine marched: assess, adjust, automate. And because the residents' homes couldn't easily move, and because new parks weren't opening to absorb pressure, the consolidation didn't face a market check. It fed on fragmentation until the fragments belonged to a few names and a few dashboards. Back at the porch with the 40% notice, this is the line that connects. That paper isn't an isolated act of one ambitious buyer. It's the outcome of a decade-long Rollup that turned scattered, idiosyncratic communities into assets coordinated across states and funds. From the first mailer to the last lease, the wave carried mom-and-pop shores under a tide they never saw coming. The rent shock, how hikes happen and why they stick. While that was happening in boardrooms, life inside the park shifted by calendar. 60 days after the sale, envelopes arrived. The letterhead had a new logo and a phrase that showed up 3 times: aligning to market. The number beneath it jumped 20, 30, sometimes 70%. Not a gradual climb, a step. Managers were told to keep a calm tone. We're standardizing with regional rates. Residents heard the same words and saw the same math. Rent due on the 1st, late on the 4th, $5 per day penalties after that. What nobody knew at the time was how many levers would move in sync. Alongside the rent, a separate insert listed utility normalization. The park had paid water before. Now, submetering meant residents paid every gallon, plus a monthly service fee. Sewer and trash? Itemized, with administrative charges the old owner had absorbed. A storage lot that had been first come for old trailers turned into rentable spaces with gate codes and line item pricing. The promise on paper said transparency. The effect at the kitchen table was a higher bottom line, no matter how much you conserved. Then the rules clicked tighter. Leases arrived with more pages than anyone remembered. No subletting without written approval. Exterior standards with photo checklists. 2 vehicles per lot. 3rd requires a paid permit. Guest passes for overnights. The old grace period vanished. If your Social Security cleared on the 5th, you needed a plan. Managers, many new to the property, were trained to repeat it. We enforce the lease. That sentence sounded neutral until a truck broke down, until a kid got sick, until a paycheck slipped by a weekend. From their perspective, the operators called this professionalization. It came with spreadsheets of delinquency targets and recovery timelines. Late fees added up fast. Miss 1 payment and you owed rent plus penalties. Miss 2 and the ledger looked like a slope you couldn't climb. Notices posted on doors used formal language. Demand to cure, intent to terminate. The park didn't have to shout. It just had to measure days. Here's where the trap showed its teeth. People asked, could we just move? The answer sat in a binder of quotes. A single-wide full service, within the county, thousands. A double-wide, disassembly and reinstallation, permits, utility reconnection. $15,000 to $20,000. Even the low end, about $9,000 on average, might as well have been $90,000 for a family with 2 weeks of savings. And that was before the next hurdle, finding a pad. Calls to nearby parks circled back to the same companies, the same rent sheets, and the same line: no vacancies, or no homes older than a certain year. A father of 3 pulled out a yellow legal pad and did the math the night his notice arrived. Pad rent up by 40%. Water now billed, estimated from last month's usage. 2 cars, 1 extra fee. He called movers out of hope, not expectation, and learned what others already knew. There's no DIY when you're unbolting a house from anchors. The quote landed at $12,800 without surprises. He had $900 in savings and a credit card already carrying a balance from a break job. He circled 2 options, pay the hike or walk. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the fine print. The lease added clauses that looked like housekeeping but carried weight. If you fell behind and received an eviction, and if the home was deemed abandoned after a short window, the park could take possession under state procedures. A rent-to-own addendum for a park-owned unit required maintenance like an owner, but offered none of the title protections. In practice, missing payments didn't just risk a court record, it threatened the equity in the walls around you. Managers knew the power of that threat, even if they never said it aloud. At the end of the month, residents who'd never missed a payment before lined up with money orders and questions they already knew the answers to. Is there any way to phase this in? Can I pay water quarterly? The answers were scripts. The shock wasn't an accident, it was the mechanism. Appraisals looked forward to a new NOI. Lenders waited for a seasoned rent roll. Each notice posted on each door was part of a timeline to the refinance. Not everyone cracked. A few neighbors compared letters and spotted errors, incorrect meter reads, fees not allowed under state law. They pushed back and won small corrections. But the structure held because the exit didn't. Even those who wanted to resist had to sleep somewhere next month. The raise landed, the ledger adjusted, and the portfolio upstream ticked a sell from yellow to green. For families under these roofs, aligning to market wasn't a sentence in a deck. Leases ruled. It was the sound of the clause that bites later. 3 days after the rent letter, a thicker envelope arrived. It wasn't a bill, it was a rewrite of life. The cover page called it standardization. Inside, the lease had doubled in size. The first lines looked ordinary: term, rent, due date. Then the language shifted. Owner reserves the right to modify community rules and fee schedules at any time with notice. One sentence gave the operator a lever to move goalposts whenever the spreadsheet asked. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the addenda. A rent-to-own option appeared for the vacant home at Lot 12. The payments looked like a path to ownership, but the terms said otherwise. Residents would be responsible for repairs as if owner, while title stayed with the park until the last dollar cleared. Missed payments, an eviction worked like any tenancy. Years of sweat equity could vanish with one default. The word own did heavy lifting for marketing. The paperwork did heavier lifting for control. Park first purchase rights showed up next. If you tried to sell your home, the park got the first chance to buy it, often at a price tied to an appraisal they approved. Even if they passed, the buyer you found had to be screened and approved, sometimes to standards so tight they functioned as a veto. Exterior changes, paint, skirting, sheds, needed sign-off. The walls you owned were yours until a clause decided they weren't. Then came the fee schedule, tucked deep in the packet, laid out like a menu. Annual increases pegged to CPI plus 2%. Administrative charges for utility billing. A late fee structure that reset monthly and stacked quickly. None of it sounded wild in isolation. In sequence, with rent hikes and billbacks, it built a slope that tilted residents toward arrears. Here's where one clause hid with quiet teeth. Abandonment. It read like a housekeeping note. If a resident vacated without removing the home, or if they were evicted and failed to claim it within a short statutory window, the home could be deemed abandoned and transferred to the park through a legal process. On paper, it kept blight at bay. In practice, paired with sudden rent shocks, it turned default into asset capture. Miss enough payments, fall into eviction, and the structure you bought, your equity, could become park inventory, ready to be re-rented or sold under a new lease. A veteran down the street learned the shape of that clause the hard way. He'd been on time for a decade. After the hike, he slipped once, then chased fees he didn't expect. The notice to cure landed on a Friday. By Monday, a second letter set a court date. He called the number at the bottom and got a voicemail tree. In court, the manager read from the lease. The judge nodded to the contract. After lockout, the clock on abandonment started ticking. He asked about selling the home to cover arrears. Subject to approval, the office said, reminding him of the right of first refusal. His home, the one he'd insulated, where he'd replaced windows last winter, was now a line item. Residents felt it in small choices. A single parent who'd once argued a parking rule now stayed quiet, worried that any violation would become leverage later. Another family delayed a needed repair because the exterior change needed written approval, and the office was slow to respond. People learned to keep files, photos of meter reads, copies of money orders, screenshots of emails. Documentation became a survival skill, because the lease turned every chat into a potential dispute. From the operator's perspective, none of this looked sinister. Council drafted clauses to align with state law. The right of first refusal kept out bad actors, they'd say. Exterior standards protected values. CPI plus increases brought predictability. Abandonment provisions cleared dead inventory. But stitched together, the terms created a paper trap that made resistance risky and exit expensive. The leverage wasn't only at the bank, it lived in black ink. What nobody knew at the time, flipping past signatures, was how each clause linked to the debt engine upstream. Unilateral change provisions let fee schedules match pro forma assumptions. Purchase rights preserved control of turnover. Approval standards curated the rent roll. Abandonment converted delinquency into saleable stock. The lease wasn't a formality. It was the machinery that turned a neighborhood into a balance sheet that could be refinanced. A neighbor circled one sentence and slid the packet across a table at the community center. Failure to remove or claim home within X days constitutes abandonment. She traced it with her finger. "This is the bite," she said. "This is how they get the house." Around her, people nodded, not because they understood every legal edge, but because they felt the gravity. The rent set the panic. The paper set the terms of surrender. The debt engine, how leverage turns rents into endless refinances. To see the gears behind that rent letter, follow the money up a level. The day a fund closes on a park, the clock starts on a loan that expects the story to speed up. Bridge financing is common, short-term, interest-only debt that gives operators time to stabilize the asset. Stabilize is code for raise income, cut leakage, and prove those numbers will stick. Each month is a test. Did the rent increase land? Did fees post? Did delinquencies shrink on schedule? Appraisers don't look at granite or paint colors here. They look at net operating income. It's simple math. Value is NOI divided by a cap rate. Raise NOI by $1, multiply by the inverse of that rate, and you've created value on paper. At a 6% cap, every extra annual dollar of NOI adds roughly $16.67 in appraised value. Multiply that across 300 pads, and the incentive is loud. A $50 lot rent bump across 300 homes means $180,000 more NOI a year, about $3 million in appraised lift at that cap. Meanwhile, the loan terms create runway. Interest-only periods keep debt service lower while the increases season. Covenants require reporting, occupancy, collections, expense ratios. Miss the targets, and the lender gets nervous. Hit them, and you unlock the next chapter, the cash-out refi. That's the rinse and raise, refi, repeat. You refinance at the higher valuation, pay off the bridge, pull equity, and sometimes roll into cheaper, longer-term debt. The spreadsheet calls it de-risking. Residents call it a new normal. Securitization lurks in the background. One park is small. 10 parks bundled together with similar leases and stabilized rent rolls look like a safer note to a wider pool of buyers. Lenders pool loans into bonds. Agency debt and CRE CLOs pull in capital from investors who will never see a pad or hear a complaint about water pressure. The payment stream at your kitchen table becomes cash flow that feeds a tranche sold in a quiet room far away. Inside the operator's office, the waterfall model sets the tone. Preferred returns promise LPs a certain yield before the sponsor takes a promote. Asset management fees tick regardless, acquisition fees are already booked, and property management fees clip the top line. Stacked together, those fees don't just compensate, they push growth to hit return hurdles inside a 3 to 7 year horizon. Hold forever doesn't pencil when your fund has to exit or refi on schedule. Here's where the lease you sign ties directly to a banker's checklist. Utility billbacks move variable costs off the operator's P&L and onto yours, smoothing expenses. CPI plus clauses add automatic revenue escalators that make pro forma lines feel safe. Right of first refusal and buyer approval provisions protect the rent roll from churn the lender doesn't like. Abandonment clauses limit downtime on delinquent units by turning them into inventory. Every clause you met in that packet has a corresponding cell in the loan's risk matrix. What nobody in the park sees is the timing dance. Lenders often underwrite to a trailing 12 months of income, but bridge shops will use pro forma stabilized numbers if the plan looks credible. That's why increases land fast, 60 to 120 days, to start the seasoning period. By the time the first refi application is in, managers have months of aligned rents, fee recoveries, and cleaner delinquency reports to present. Each posted payment is a data point that proves the thesis and unlocks cheaper capital. Meanwhile, small choices at the ground level keep the narrative moving. A cracked road gets patched, not repaved, because the loan doesn't require a new surface to hit valuation. A water leak gets fixed, but not the whole line replaced. CAPEX that improves NOI to value is chosen carefully. The operator isn't neglectful. They're rational under a debt stack that rewards revenue growth more than long-horizon reinvestment. The bridge to refi is built on proof of pay, not show of polish. From their perspective, lenders like the category for a reason. In downturns, residents cling to the most affordable roof they can keep. Manufactured home communities are marketed as recession-resistant, with low historical vacancy and sticky tenants. The scarcity created by zoning makes supply shocks rare. Add institutional standardization, centralized billing, collection software, AI pricing tools setting renewal targets, and the risk narrows into something bond buyers can model. When capital gets comfortable, leverage deepens. But leverage sets a metronome residents can hear. Late fees aren't random. They're part of delinquency management tuned to cushion DSCR. Strict rule enforcement isn't pettiness. It's a path to curate who stays, people who can absorb annual escalators. Evictions, while unpopular on paper, clear non-paying accounts before reporting dates. It's a rhythm you can measure by door tags and court calendars. Here's the quiet irony. Even if a park runs well, the pressure doesn't let up. A successful refi loads the asset with cheaper debt, but also resets expectations for growth. The next capital call seeks the next acquisition, funded by the cash you just pulled out. The treadmill speeds slightly. To keep pace, portfolios look for more undermarket rents to lift, more revenue recovery to implement, more clauses to standardize. Residents feel it as endless motion. The debt engine feels it as necessary momentum. In the aftermath of each refinance, a number changes on a screen miles away. In the park, the change is simpler. The due date doesn't move, and the stakes of missing it rise. Zoning and no new supply. The moat you pay for. While the debt engine hums, the ground rules outside the fence harden. City halls don't pass ordinances that say no manufactured homes. They pass parking minimums, design standards, and land use maps that nudge parks to the margins and freeze them there. On paper, it looks like neutral planning. In practice, it builds a wall no one has to maintain, and a moat someone else pays for. 3 months before those 40% notices, a planning commission 2 towns overheld a hearing. The agenda said text amendment. A developer proposed a small, neatly designed manufactured home community with landscaped buffers and internal sidewalks. The room filled with neighbors who didn't use the word ban. They asked about traffic, school crowding, police calls, property values. A council member suggested a more appropriate use for the parcel, light industrial. The vote tabled, then a study, then silence. The land use map stayed colored for something else. Meanwhile, older parks feel another kind of squeeze, redevelopment pressure. A private equity platform buys a site near a highway interchange and discovers the dirt is worth more as townhomes. The closure statute in that state requires notice and a modest relocation stipend. But relocation to where? Within 50 miles, vacancy is near zero, and most parks won't accept homes older than a certain year. The stipend covers a fraction of a $9,000 to $20,000 move, and even then, the receiving park can say no. Households take buyouts that don't replace the home they're losing. The spreadsheet counts a successful exit. The street counts a diaspora. Scarcity doesn't happen by accident. It's cited in investor decks as a feature. Limited new supply shows up as a bullet, a moat you can monetize. When operators point to market rates, they're pointing into a closed loop, prices set inside a system where entry is nearly impossible. Even sympathetic planners admit there's no political oxygen to approve new parks. They'll consider manufactured housing subdivisions with deeded lots and upscale finishes. But rental pad communities for working families? The proposals die in workshops. Municipal utilities add another lever. A park with private wells and septics faces stricter compliance. Upgrade plans require permits, engineering, and money. Some cities negotiate service extensions, but condition them on annexation and zoning changes that raise taxes and impose new standards. An owner who balks at the cost delays repairs, and the city cites violations. Residents end up between a failing system and a standoff they can't influence. The narrative shifts. This park is a nuisance, justification for downzoning or redevelopment. The path of least resistance for the city becomes the path of greatest disruption for the community. Across town, a different story shows how policy choices ripple. A county once allowed several small parks along a state route. Over years, it adopted a comprehensive plan that reclassified the corridor for employment centers. Each time a park applied to replace aging infrastructure, staff flagged inconsistency with long-term vision. Grants passed them by. When a sewer main finally collapsed, the repair became a political football. Within 18 months, 2 parks closed. Residents scattered. The county hit its land use target. No new parks opened to replace what vanished. What nobody in that hearing room knew was how directly these choices fed the finance model. When new communities can't open, existing pads become irreplaceable. Operators can raise rents confident that the nearest alternative is controlled by the same few platforms or governed by the same constraints. Even ethical owners who want to keep rates steady absorb the market lift around them. Appraisers lean on scarcity as a support for higher valuations. Lenders like the moat. It reads as risk protection. Residents pay for that moat every first of the month. There's an irony officials feel but rarely name. Zoning that aimed to protect neighborhood character entrenches monopoly pricing power over the most affordable owned homes in the region. It also concentrates vulnerability. A fire, a storm, or a closure doesn't displace a few renters. It destabilizes a neighborhood of owners whose asset can't easily cross a city line. If those households were in apartments, the town might activate voucher programs or emergency rehousing. In parks, the response is murkier because ownership is split and statutes lag. Some places try to push back. A city adopts an overlay zone that permits new manufactured home communities by right with basic standards. A county creates a relocation fund tied to redevelopment fees, earmarked for households displaced by park closures. A state requires longer notice periods, real purchase opportunities, and meaningful assistance indexed to moving costs. These measures help at the margins, but the larger story stays the same. For decades, policy has made new supply rare and old supply fragile. The power to approve or deny became a gate. Then capital learned to charge at the gate. Back at our park, residents crowd a community center to draft letters to council. They ask for inspections on the new billing system, for relief on late fees, for a meeting with the operator. Someone suggests advocating for a new park on county land. The organizer sighs. He's been to those hearings. He knows the language that will surface: traffic, schools, buffers. He also knows the quiet truth. Until the map changes, the moat holds. And as long as it holds, the notice on the door reads like fate, not policy. Monetizing the margins, fees, fines, and ancillary plays. Once rents reset, the real money starts hiding in the margins. Operators call it revenue recovery, and it shows up as line items you didn't see before. Water gets submetered, then billed back with a monthly administrative fee. Sewer is separated from trash, which is separated from recycling, each with its own service charge. The language feels neutral: cost transparency, conservation incentives, but the bill knows only one direction. Even if you use less, the fixed fees stay. Meanwhile, storage lots that once held broken-down pickups turn into rentable spaces with gate codes and insurance requirements. Got an extra vehicle because your kid just started a delivery job? There's a vehicle registration fee, plus a third car surcharge, plus a warning that unpermitted cars can be towed at owner's expense. Pets. Register them, pay a monthly pet rent, and expect a one-time DNA swab if the company adopted waste management policies borrowed from luxury apartments. A guest staying more than a few nights? There's a guest pass. 2 weeks. That's a temporary resident screening, with an application charge that lands whether they're approved or not. Cable and internet used to be a call to the provider. Now the park has an exclusive with a bulk rate partner. You can opt out, technically, but notices warn that alternative installations violate exterior standards. The preferred plan comes with a revenue share back to management. You're told it's a deal, you learn it's a channel. Insurance follows the same path. Leases require liability coverage from approved partners, and the cheapest policy on their sheet costs more than what you could find outside, if outside still counts when the lease names the vendor. Here's where the paper meets the pavement. A family who made the new rent work by tightening groceries and sharing a car gets tripped by timing. The first falls on a Friday, the paycheck clears Monday. The lease says late on the 4th. They bring a money order on the 5th and find a $35 late fee posted. It's annoying but manageable. Next month, the car needs tires. Rent posts one day late again. Another $35. Then the water bill arrives with a service administration charge that wasn't on the insert, $12.50 a month. A trash fuel surcharge appears, $6. By the end of the quarter, $117 in small add-ons sits like gravel at the bottom of their ledger. Now watch the slope. A kid gets the flu, a parent misses shifts, the rent posts on the 6th. The system adds the $35, then a daily penalty that starts accruing. A notice to cure hits the door with a 7-day clock and a $25 posting fee allowed under the lease. They pay what they can, but the software prioritizes oldest charges first. Part of the payment knocks down last month's fees, leaving a sliver of principal unpaid. The ledger still shows a balance. The next month, that balance triggers a second late fee on top of the first, because the account never technically returned to zero. By week 3, they're in eviction court over $184 they didn't know remained. The judge points to the ledger. The manager points to the lease. The family points to the stack of receipts. It doesn't matter. Math wins. Inside the fence, there's another pipeline running. In-park home sales. When residents default and abandonment procedures transfer homes to the park, those units become inventory. Management cleans, paints, and lists them at prices that look friendly. Low down payments, no bank needed, weekly installments. The rent-to-own addendum returns, with maintenance responsibilities on the resident and title retention by the park. Miss. Payments and eviction law applies. Years of payments can evaporate into a forfeited contract, and the home cycles back for another round. Even traditional sales face a funnel. Right of first refusal clauses give the park the first crack at buying your home. If they pass, your buyer needs approval. Credit standards inside the park can be tighter than the banks, and any denial counts as grounds to cancel your deal. Control over turnover preserves pricing power, which feeds appraisal comps, which feeds the next refi. Operators defend these plays as modern management, aligning costs with users, maintaining standards, expanding services. Residents feel the spread between promised affordability and lived expense. Each fee looks small. Together, they're a second rent hiding under the first. And because the lease lets schedules escalate annually, CPI plus here, administrative adjustment there. The baseline creeps forward even if headline rent holds for a year. This is where the model hums. Margins monetize habits, water use, parking, pets, Wi-Fi, as if the neighborhood were a set of subscriptions. Delinquencies become revenue via fees. Defaults become inventory via clauses. Inventory becomes finance plans with near-certain approvals and high effective rates. The same fence that keeps costs predictable for investors traps households in a loop of charges that's hard to escape. One $35 fee is a nudge. A year of nudges is a shove. And on a court calendar across town, that shove turns into a judgment that clears a path, organizing an ownership to land on the same lot, ROC, and tenant leverage. While fees stacked and notices multiplied, a different conversation started in a church basement 2 blocks from the park office. Folding chairs, a pot of coffee, a whiteboard with 3 words at the top: protect, organize, purchase. A woman who'd never led a meeting tapped her pen and said what everyone knew but hadn't named. If the exit is blocked and the lease is a trap, the only real power is collective. Now, here's where the story shifts from spreadsheets to bylaws. Resident-owned communities, ROCs, aren't a slogan. They're a legal pivot. Instead of each household standing alone against a landlord, the land becomes a cooperative corporation the residents collectively own. You keep title to your home, but you buy a membership share in the co-op that owns the dirt, the water lines, the roads. Lot rent keeps the lights on and pays the mortgage. Policy gets set by the people who live behind those porches. The first step isn't money. It's a vote. Every home gets a say. Should we try to buy the park? In that basement, hands went up, not because anyone had cash, but because they had nothing left to lose. The organizer slid 2 phone numbers across the table: an affiliated nonprofit developer and ROC USA, a national network built to make this exact flip possible. They've helped more than 330 communities do this, she said. About 23,000 home sites stabilized. It's not theory. Calls turned into site walks and file folders. Lenders looked at the books differently than private equity did. Instead of underwriting to a fast refi, mission lenders assessed whether the co-op could run the place sustainably. Could they handle the water system? The roads? Could they set lot fees that covered debt service and reserves without crushing fixed incomes? Meetings stretched late. People who'd never said CPI out loud learned what a reserve study was. A retired electrician volunteered to map the breaker panels. A nurse offered to run communications. The same community that had been managed from a distance started managing itself. Then came the number. The seller named a price. The co-op's advisors ran their own comps and made an offer. In some states, a right of first refusal law forced the seller to give residents a shot. In others, pressure and press did the pushing. The co-op lined up financing: a first mortgage from a community development lender, a subordinate loan from a state program, maybe a small grant for urgent infrastructure. ROC USA's affiliates bridged the gap with technical assistance and underwriting. The closing date hit everyone like a brick and a sunrise at once. On day 1, something small but profound changed. The fee schedule didn't disappear, it got explained. The board, elected from the resident body, opened the books at a meeting and set lot fees with a clear target. In ROCs across the country, those fees have grown on average about 0.9% a year, measured, debated, and voted on, while commercial operators were posting double-digit hikes after acquisitions. In roughly 16 and a half years of ROC USA-supported communities, foreclosures on co-op mortgages have been effectively zero. Stability wasn't a promise. It showed up in court records that never got filed. A skeptic in the back asked the hard question: what about the person who can't pay even a small increase? The board built hardship policies, temporary reductions, payment plans, connections to aid. Delinquency management still happened, but without the predatory cadence. Late fees existed to keep the books honest, not to pad revenue. Abandonment clauses that once lurked in leases were rewritten to protect members' equity and allow sales inside the community at fair prices. Then came reinvestment. Instead of skirting big fixes, the co-op planned them. A cracked road got repaved, not patched, because the horizon was years, not the next refi. A leaky water main became a grant application, then a trench with new pipe. Each project tightened the loop between voice and outcome. When someone objected to a shed rule, they brought it to a meeting and changed it. Exterior standards still mattered, but the arbiter was a neighbor, not a regional manager with a quota. Meanwhile, a ripple moved beyond the fence. Local officials who'd once tabled park proposals noticed that resident-owned communities didn't show up in code enforcement logs the way some investor-owned parks did. A county housing staffer used a closure threat at another park to pilot a purchase opportunity policy that gave residents a formal window to organize and bid. State legislators toured the co-op, met retirees who could finally sleep, and wrote bills to seed financing pools for ROC conversions. For the family with the yellow legal pad, the math bent. Lot fees rose modestly that first year to meet the new mortgage. The board explained why: reserves for sewer upgrades, a true accounting of trash. Costs without junk add-ons, a plan to phase out the third car surcharge if the budget allowed. The father took a committee slot to negotiate the new cable contract. The park ended the revenue share and chose an open access policy that let residents pick providers. Not every attempt works. Some communities can't move fast enough to meet a seller's deadline. Others struggle with the learning curve of governance. Lawyers still hover, lenders still want discipline. But when it takes, the difference hums at ground level. Eviction becomes the last tool, not the first. Sales happen with approval standards that fit the community, not a distant underwriting model. And the culture flips. People who were managed become members who manage. Back at the church basement, the organizer erased the whiteboard and wrote a new word: horizon. The trap relied on isolation and leverage. The co-op model answered with voice and time. The debt engine upstream didn't vanish, but it lost its grip on this fence line. On porches that once held notices, you could hear the quiet relief of a payment made to a board you elected. buying a future you could see. Policy front, laws, loopholes, and the slow grind of reform. While neighbors drafted bylaws in a church basement, lawmakers wrestled with a slower tool, statutes. Policy moved like wet concrete, heavy, stubborn, shaping the ground only if pushed long enough. Residents needed relief yesterday. Legislatures worked on a schedule that answered to next year. Rent stabilization landed first in city council chambers, then collided with state preemption. A city-capped annual pad increases to inflation plus a sliver, only to watch the State House pass a bill barring local rent controls. Industry lobbyists called stabilization a supply killer, warning that investors would flee and infrastructure would rot. Residents called it oxygen. In places where caps survived, they often came with carve-outs, exemptions for capital improvements, formulas that reset baselines after ownership changes, and appeal processes that let operators argue hardship. The ceiling existed, but it leaked by design. Good cause eviction rules tried to slow the churn. No termination without a stated reason sounded simple until the reasons expanded: rule noncompliance, nuisance, failure to keep exteriors to standard. Paperwork became the battlefield. A loose skirting panel could turn into a notice to cure. A missed deadline could become cause. Advocates pushed to align cure periods with reality. Pay cycles, whether delays, permit timelines. In stronger statutes, residents got longer notice, clear cure rights, and protection against retaliation for organizing. In weaker ones, enforcement sat on the shoulders of understaffed agencies and legal aid clinics already drowning. Notice periods for rent hikes and closures stretched in some states from 30 to 60 to 90 days, even up to a year for park shutdowns. On paper, more time meant more options. In practice, options depended on money and vacancies that didn't exist. Relocation assistance statutes recognized the cost of moving a home, often $9,000 to $20,000 for full-service jobs, but pegged payouts far lower, set flat amounts, or limited eligibility to homes under certain ages. Operators wrote checks sized to policy, not to quotes from movers. Residents pocketed stipends that couldn't buy a pad or cover disassembly and reinstallation. The statute satisfied itself. The family sold a home for parts. Closures forced another fight: purchase opportunities. Right of first refusal laws in a handful of states required owners to notify residents and give them a window to organize and bid. Where the framework was strong, timelines synced with real financing. 90 to 120 days to form a co-op, sign letters of interest, and secure term sheets. Where it was weak, windows were too short, notices vague, and exceptions plentiful. Sellers learned to structure deals around the law, selling entity interests instead of the property, packaging the park with other assets, or timing notices during holidays. Residents got postcards, buyers got closings. Financing policy tried to tilt the field. State housing agencies seeded funds that paired with community development lenders to back co-ops. A few cities created acquisition pools that moved with the speed private equity used to win. Freddie and Fannie tested pilot programs with tenant protections on loans they touched, longer notice, limits on sudden rent spikes, caps on pass-throughs, but coverage only reached borrowers who used agency debt. Private capital sidestepped those strings with bridge loans and non-agency securitizations. The same property under two lenders could have different rights on paper. The resident facing a 40% hike didn't know which version they lived under. Enforcement made or unmade the best ideas. Attorney General units charged with policing unfair practices had more complaints than attorneys. Housing departments fielded meter disputes and fee legality questions with hotlines and online forms that routed to backlogs. Even when an investigator agreed a clause violated statute, penalties were small, a fine that read as a cost of doing business. Operators adjusted templates and kept the engine running. Residents learned that individual victories didn't scale without systemic teeth. Meanwhile, industry groups sharpened their message. They branded parks as naturally affordable workforce housing and framed institutional ownership as modernization. Professional management, capital for upgrades, safety, and consistency. They warned that strict rent caps would push owners to close parks and redevelop, shrinking supply and displacing the very people reformers sought to protect. In hearings, they brought operators with polished binders and residents who praised a rulebook that kept neighbors in line. The narrative muddied what residents in crisis were trying to say. We need predictability without extraction. A different coalition countered with specifics. They brought moving quotes to show the $9,000 to $20,000 trap. They mapped vacancies, none within 50 miles. They showed ROC data. 338 plus communities stabilized, about 23,000 home sites, average lot fee increases near 0.9% annually, almost no co-op foreclosures in 16 and a half years. They argued for a package, not piecemeal fixes. Rent stabilization tied to real cost indices. Good cause eviction with meaningful cure rights. Closure laws with assistance pegged to documented moving costs. Purchase opportunities with enforceable timelines. Financing pools that could move at deal speed. Enforcement budgets that matched the caseload. Progress looked like inches. A state expanded notice periods and barred abandonment clauses that transferred homes after rushed timelines. Another funded a revolving loan for co-op acquisitions and trained local officials to spot lease traps. A city attorney sued an operator over unlawful fees and won refunds, and a reputation that made other operators think twice. None of it moved as fast as the dead engine, but taken together, it gave organizers leverage and bought time. Policy didn't rebuild trust. It set guardrails. For families reading notices on their doors, those rails meant the difference between a cliff and a hard turn. For the capital upstream, they signaled that the era of silent harvest had company at the table. The grind continued, measured in hearings, votes, and the quiet relief of a month that didn't bring human cost, micro-stories from the edge. The week the envelopes went up, Ruth lined every pill bottle on her kitchen counter. 76, widow, Navy cook's daughter. Her Social Security covered groceries, a church tithe, and the old lot rent with a cushion she called bus money. The new number erased the cushion. The pharmacy rang about her heart meds. She did the math twice, then once more with the porch light on. Pay the hike, split pills and pray. Or keep the dosage and risk the notice on her door. She slid the pill cutter across Formica like a coin and made a choice she hated. Across the lane, Mariah stacked uniforms, 2 for the diner, 1 for the new night shift at the warehouse. Single mom, 9-year-old who loved science. The 40% jump didn't leave room for error, so she took the extra shift and slept in her car on lunch breaks. 2 weeks in, the school called. Her son was falling asleep in class. At month's end, a spreadsheet in a distant office logged rent collected on time. At home, his backpack carried a transfer form because the second job pushed them to an aunt's address in another district. He asked if robots at the warehouse were like the ones in his book. She said she'd show him one day. 3 lots over, Luis, an Army veteran, sanded a window frame on a home he'd bought 5 years back. He'd replaced skirting himself, laid pavers he found on Craigslist, equity he could touch. The hike hit the same week his part-time hours got cut. He paid late, then later, then stared at a ledger that grew fees faster than he could shrink them. The court date was 15 minutes long. After the lock change, he asked if he could list the home. The office pointed to the lease, right of first refusal, buyer approval. The approval never came. The home moved into park inventory. His VA photo came down, and a flyer with newly renovated went up. A WhatsApp group pinged to life that night. A teenager started it, added her mom, who added neighbors. They traded screenshots of bills, template letters, a link to legal aid. Someone found a reporter's email. They ran a bottled water drop when a main broke, and the office voicemail looped. A volunteer taught people to read their submeter. A father posted a reminder. Photograph the meter on the last day of the month. Small wins stacked, 2 bogus fees reversed, a tow notice rescinded, a manager who agreed to move a deadline because he saw the thread blowing up. Then James tried to move his home. He'd found a park an hour away with a rumored vacancy and a lower pad rent, owned by a cousin of a friend. He called movers, got the quotes everyone gets. $9,000 if nothing goes wrong, more if the axles need work, permits, escort cars, utility disconnect and reconnect. He chose a weekend when buddies could help box up. Saturday morning, the receiving park called back. No homes older than 1999. His is a 1996. He asked about an exception. The answer was a policy he couldn't meet. By Sunday, his kids' beds were in a U-Haul and his house was still anchored. Monday, he paid the new rent with the moving fund he'd scraped together, then took the boxes back out and told his daughter they'd camp in the living room like a pretend trip. Even the softest rules pressed hard. Darnell, a night shift mechanic, parked a 3rd car, his niece's, beside his single wide when her transmission died. A notice appeared, Unpermitted vehicle, $75 fee. Tow in 48 hours. He worked doubles to cover it, missed sleep, missed his rent window by a day, and watched the $35 late charge ripple through the next 2 months. In court, he held up pay stubs and a photo of the flat he'd fixed. The ledger didn't recognize wrenches or favors, just dates and balances. Through all of it, the neighborhood kept acting like one. Casseroles after a surgery. A flashlight chain when the lights blinked. Kids walking in pairs to the bus. It's the part no deck can model. The emotional equity that holds when the financial kind gets stripped thin. The notices multiply. The bills stack. The group chat hums. People cling to dignity and each other while a business model tests how much a home can absorb before it breaks. The $2 trillion vector. Capital flows and the bigger bet. Pull back from the fence and the ledger turns into a map of money. What looks local from a porch reads global in a pension committee packet. The cash that tightens late fees in one park travels through funds, lenders, and bonds stacked high enough to cast a shadow on a state house and a school board meeting. Start with the promise that opened the door: recession-resistant housing. Institutional managers told their limited partners they'd found a stream that wouldn't dry up when headlines turned red. Manufactured home communities fit the brief: inelastic demand, scarce supply, sticky tenants. That pitch didn't stop at a single pool. It flowed into a broader private equity and real estate stack measured in trillions, not millions. When allocators carve up portfolios, real assets and alternatives get thick slices. Housing scarcity, rebranded as strategy, becomes a magnet for that capital. Meanwhile, pensions entered like anchors. Public retirement systems, teachers' funds, police and fire, big union plans. They push billions into private equity vehicles and real estate funds run by names everyone recognizes. Some of that money lands, by design, in workforce housing platforms that include manufactured home parks. The irony is quiet but complete. Your retirement contribution might be paying the dividends tied to someone else's rent letter. Insurance general accounts followed, hunting yield that beat bonds without swinging like stocks. REITs already lived in housing. Together, they formed a chorus: stable cash, long duration inflation hedge. The brands carried weight. Blackstone's move into parks after 2018 didn't just change one portfolio. It validated the category for committees that want cover when they vote yes. Carlyle-backed platforms, Apollo-linked Inspire communities. Each acquisition signaled there was room to roll up mom-and-pops and raise yields without visible political blowback. Family offices followed, then syndicators who promised retail investors a chance to ride the same wave. A niche became an index in waiting. What nobody outside the room saw was the cross-asset stitching. The same funds that buy parks by the logistics facilities down the road and the land under them. They eye water rights when a community relies on private wells, then negotiate utility extensions that change tax maps. They bank land near interchanges and model how a future upzone turns today's rent roll into tomorrow's exit. A pad rent isn't just a pad rent. It's a keystone in a regional bet on scarcity. Pricing tools got smarter too. Revenue management software crawled rent rolls, flagged undermarket lots, and set renewal targets calibrated to hit pro forma NOI. AI-assisted systems pulled comps from sister parks, tested sensitivity to pushback, and recommended sequences: rent first, fees later. Fees first, rent later, based on delinquency patterns. The manager's hunch gave way to dashboards that predicted who could absorb what without triggering churn. The spreadsheet became a thermostat and a metronome. Securitization tightened the loop. Once a platform stabilized 10, 20, 50 parks with standardized leases and proven collections, lenders could bundle loans into bonds. Agency debt touched some, but CRE CLOs and private conduits reached many more. The pool of buyers, asset managers, insurers, even money market funds seeking floating rate slices, expanded. That expansion mattered. When more buyers stand ready for your paper, your cost of capital falls, and the incentive to originate more of the same rises. Each bundle contained 1,000 kitchen tables. Each coupon payment told upstream investors the model worked. The hedge story sealed the pitch. Lot rents, pegged to CPI plus clauses, floated with inflation. Expenses got pushed to residents through billbacks. As prices rose in the broader economy, cash flows kept pace. For allocators who lived through zero-interest years and then rate shocks, this felt like balance. We're protecting the portfolio, a consultant would say, pointing to lines that rose gently while equities whipsawed. No one showed the pill cutter on Ruth's counter when they made that case. Here's where it loops back to the porch. When capital moves at that scale, it hunts categories that can absorb it. Manufactured housing, long ignored by planners and polite markets, didn't have a natural shield. Zoning made new supply rare, which read as safety to lenders. The inability to move homes cheaply, about $9,000 on average, $15,000 to $20,000 for double wides when the job is full service, read as stickiness to bond buyers. Lease clauses that centralized control read as risk mitigation. Every feature that trapped residents ticked a box on a risk model. The better the trap, the better the rating. Not every dollar flowed to extraction. Some funds backed co-ops and mission-driven operators with long holds and capped increases. A few insurers wrote lower-cost, longer-term loans to ROCs because defaults were near zero and communities governed themselves well. But those were side channels, thin compared to the main current pushing toward platforms that could scale, securitize, and exit on clockwork. A committee vote in a boardroom far away doesn't feel like an event when you're reading a notice on your door. Yet the connection is direct. The big bet isn't on one park, one family, one fee. It's on a system that treats millions of small decisions to pay this month as dependable cash flow. That's the $2 trillion vector. Capital drawn to the predictability of a home that can't leave, multiplied by policy that won't replace it, enforced by paper that converts lapses into assets. The numbers align. The lives bend to fit them. Actionable playbook. Protect, organize, escape, or buy. Start at the kitchen table with the lease. Highlight 3 hotspots: unilateral rule changes, right of first refusal and buyer approval, and the abandonment clause. If failure to remove or claim home within X days constitutes abandonment, appears, underline it. Photograph every page, front and back. Store copies off-site. Email them to yourself and a trusted person. From now on, every rent payment is documented. Money order receipts, bank screenshots, timestamps. Take monthly photos of the water submeter on the last day. Keep a log, date, meter reading, payment amount, confirmation number. Viral tip: teach one neighbor this checklist, momentum doubles. Next, build a small circle. 2 neighbors you trust, then 2 more. Share a text thread. Swap copies of leases to spot patterns and illegal fees under your state law. If the park switched to utility billbacks, compare usage lines for obvious errors and service administration, charges not listed in the lease. Ask legal aid for a quick screening. Many clinics know these templates cold. Even if they can't take your case, they'll give you a checklist of defenses. Improper notice periods, fees barred by statute, cure rights not honored. From there, turn a circle into a tenant association. It can start informal, monthly meetings, a sign-in sheet, a shared folder with scanned documents, and a rent ledger template. Elect 3 people: a spokesperson, a records keeper, a liaison for legal aid and media. File the basic paperwork if your state allows tenant groups formal standing. You're not trying to pick a fight. You're creating a counterpart the operator has to recognize. When you write the first letter, write as a group. Ask for a meeting. Bring a short agenda, billing errors, phase-in options for seniors on fixed incomes, a grace period that matches pay cycles. Record agreements in writing and send follow-ups the same day. Parallel paths matter. File specific complaints with the right agencies. Utility Commission for submeter disputes, Attorney General Consumer Protection for unlawful fees, Housing Department for notice violations. Quote the clause and attach proof. These aren't silver bullets, but paper trails build leverage. A manager who shrugs at one resident will pause at a letter copy to a regulator and a local reporter. If you're teetering, tree of. Pad rent sits above everything else because missing it triggers the fastest path to eviction. If a choice forces a split payment, pay principal first and get the receipt in writing so software can't eat it with old fees. Ask for a written payment plan before you're delinquent. If you slip, request a waiver of compounding late fees. Some managers have discretion. Build a tiny emergency fund. 2 weeks of lot rent by selling and used items, picking up a weekend shift, or pooling with a neighbor and holding each other accountable. It's not a cure, it buys time. If you must exit, plan like a shopkeeper closing a store, not a panicked tenant. Document the home's condition with dated photos. Fix low-cost exterior items that trigger denials. Get a written buyer approval checklist from the office. Pre-screen buyers to those standards before you sign anything. Price realistically for an in-park sale. Outside buyers face the same approval funnel. If the park has right of first refusal, require a yes or no in writing by the deadline the lease sets, and ask for the appraiser's credentials if price disputes arise. Do not walk away without a paper trail. Abandonment converts your equity into their inventory. If you're ready to fight for the community, test the ROC path early. Call ROC USA or an affiliated nonprofit developer and ask for a feasibility check. You'll need a resident vote, basic financials, and a seller at the table. If your state has a purchase opportunity or right of first refusal law, learn the timelines now so you're not sprinting later. Identify skills in your park: bookkeeper, plumber, bilingual neighbor who can translate meetings. Ask a city or county housing staffer for warm introductions to community development lenders. Some jurisdictions maintain small acquisition funds that can bridge timing. Gather data for your offer packet. Vacancy within 50 miles, moving quotes showing about $9,000 to $20,000, age restrictions at nearby parks. Put the human stakes next to the numbers. If you're considering ethical investment, start with non-negotiables. Long hold capital, transparent books, rent growth capped at CPI or a single-digit ceiling, no abandonment windfalls, open buyer approvals, hardship policies with guardrails, and a commitment to reinvest in infrastructure on a schedule residents can see. Structure upside with residents, profit sharing on ancillary services, resident board seats, or options for a conversion to co-op over time at a formula price. If you can't sign those lines, you're not the exception, you're the model. Finally, keep the story visible. A WhatsApp group can become a newsletter. A community meeting can become a city council public comment with 5 calm voices and packets of evidence. Local press covers patterns. Patterns pressure platforms. The debt engine prefers silence. Organization creates friction that saves homes. If this helped, share it with one neighbor, right now. A home that can't move turns into a machine for profit, until the people inside move together and change who the machine serves. If you want more investigations into forces raising your bills, subscribe now. Watch our next film on water rights to see how the same money targets your faucet. Share this with someone in a park. Today might be their window to protect their home.